Struggling superpower. The first Bush presidency.
George A. W. Bush took over the office on January 20, 1989, and was the 41st President of the United States. George A. W. Bush was a two-term Vice President of the United States when Ronald Reagan served as President. Bush began his political career in the U.S. in 1967.
Bush focused a lot on the fragmentation of the Soviet Union with its dump of nuclear weapons and its scientific ability not falling into the wrong hands. Bush was involved in several wars involving Panama and Iraq. President Bush failed to expect and unable to prevent Iraq's invasion of oil-rich Kuwait as well. This resulted in the tragic Gulf War.
The Clinton years. In 1992, presidential election found place again. This time the Democrats chose Bill Clinton over George Bush. Clinton was actually the governor of Arkansas before he became president. Clinton was described as a womanizer, and therefore the Republicans tried to demolish his candidacy by declaring him as an adulterer. Clinton still won the election, but his sexual chicane still remained as a problem. Bill Clinton made a huge mistake as soon as he took over the office. He ended the persecution of homosexuals in the US military. Though this was a good thing, Clinton put too much attention on the homosexuals. Clinton had some very well knowledge about economics. He, with help from the Congress, changed the income tax for the richer ones, lowered rate for the poor, and reduced government spending by $225 billion. In autumn in 1994, more than 3 million new jobs had been made. Unemployment was decreased and the federal deficit was also declining.
The culture of the 1990s. In the years after the Cold War, the Americans took a mental holiday from all the international tensions. It was safely in the past now. Americans watched less sitcoms about families, but more about networks and friends. One of them was the series called Friends. In the literature, realism stayed with the common form of expressions. A small group of famous strong writers kept to write realistic works, such as John Updike, Norman Mailer, and Saul Bellow. But not only was all literature about realism, but also about cyberpunk fiction. The first one was Douglas Copeland's Neuromancer that made a new genre emerge. The internet also made a game changer for how to communicate, and changed a lot. The Silicon Valley became the center of economics. Google and Amazon was made and are now really big companies owning a lot. The Republicans could not easily attack Clinton from the economy side, so they used more elastic issues to stir up the electorate. They tried everything to hurt Clinton. Foreign affairs. The Soviet Empire officially disappeared after the Cold World War. It left behind small hosts of unstable regimes, such as Yugoslavia that broke apart in huge bloodbath of civil war and genocide. The EU was unable to contain the Yugoslavian people. Cautiously, US sent troops to Bosnia and later on to Kosovo. In the east, after the Cold World War, when Russia was finished in Afghanistan, Taliban took over. They were fundamentalists, and the fundamentalist idea began to spread across the western part of Asia. As I said before, the EU was unable to deal with the crisis in Yugoslavia, so Clinton mobilized NATO to halt the Serbian slaughter. There were peace in Bosnia, but in Kosovo the Serbs kept on going slaughtering. EU failed again to help, so US and NATO went back in again. These interventions was not popular in the US, but when there was success from these interventions, the US was proudful. When Clinton left office, the United States was at peace and the budget had been balanced. He had created 10 million jobs and the welfare system had been reformed. Clinton had paid off much of the national debt.
9/11 and the Bush presidency. In 2001, September 11, three planes smashed into the Twin Towers in New York and Pentagon in Washington, D.C. There was a lot of terrorist attacks going on. And this action took place as George W. Bush was serving as President of the United States. Vastly after this, Bush became a really unpopular face after this tragedy happened in the whole of US. And when terrorist attacks stopped threatening the US, Bush failed to deal with huge major issue crisis that occurred in Mexico. And this was the Hurricane Katrina that hit the coast along the Gulf of Mexico. And this took place back in September 2005. In 2008, a financial crisis occurred, and this was mostly because of Bush didn't have like an overlook of the banking industry. And this crisis was due to millions of homeowners that had taken a loan and couldn't pay the loan back, etc. George W. Bush disappeared from the public life after serving as president, and this is like quite logically since nobody really liked him in the long run. If we look at the Democratic resurgence of Obama presidency, in 2008, the first African American president had took over the office, and this was Barack Obama who had won the election. He took back the White House and he carried an impressive majority into Congress.